Welcome to the Frontier Leader Show. Today, Martin is talking to Iain Morrison.
I don't use the standard response, which is, of course AI won't take your job. It will mean changes. There's going to be massive changes to the workforce and to what roles exist in it because of AI. I've absolutely no doubt of that. You could use it if you were focused solely on bottom line and stripping your organization back to the bone. You could use it to reduce headcount. I think that's slightly short-sighted because actually empowering people with what AI can help them do better or quicker and giving them more time to do the really important work that they're actually employed to do is so much more impactful. And I think the organizations who realize that will be much more innovative and grow much more quickly.
Okay, hello and welcome to the Frontier Leader Show. I'm Martin Wheatley, and each week I speak to leaders, coaches, practitioners and technologists working out what good leadership looks like in an AI-shaped world. While you still have the app open, hit follow and subscribe so you don't miss out on the next episode. And if you want a practical starting point for leading with AI, I have a free roadmap at www.theileaderlab.com. Link is in the show notes. Now, I am very privileged to say I have a fantastic guest on today called Iain Morrison. Iain is the founder of Enlightened People, an AI-enabled HR consulting company, and we'll get into a bit more of what he does and how he does it in a second. But Iain's a chartered fellow of the CIPD and an ICF accredited coach, and someone I follow on LinkedIn quite a lot to keep up to date with some of the news and the reactions that are coming out around HR and AI in HR. He's held multiple roles across HR, including Director of People and Talent. So this is going to be a very interesting conversation. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Iain.
Thank you very much, Martin. That actually sounds quite impressive. I don't know. I don't really recognise myself, but it's all true. I
was going to do the whole Cilla Black. What's your name and where do you come from? But thought I'd do something a bit different. But no, look, for the benefit of people out there, just give us a bit more about what you do with your company. What's it all about?
Sure. Well, I started my own business about a year and a half ago and started really just doing more traditional kind of HR consultancy and project work. But I've always been fascinated by technology. And I really had a chance to invest and learn about AI. And I realized quite quickly that it was something I could teach people. I could pass on that knowledge. And I had that specialism of HR that I could understand the challenges from an HR perspective, from a leadership perspective. And so I decided quite quickly to pivot to that. And as I learned, I was generating a lot of content, making a lot of new connections in the world of AI. And it's really it snowballed really to training and workshops, specifically for HR teams, but I also often through that end up working with small and medium businesses as well.
Okay. Exciting. And there's a lot of people wanting to know everything about AI, not necessarily how it works. They just want AI, which I bet you get quite a lot of at the minute.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, the thing I always say is that anyone who calls themselves an AI expert, I'd be a bit suspicious of, because no one, the technology as we know it, instead of, LLMs, is not even 4 years old. So we are learning all the time. And as you'll know, there's a new innovation development, ground shaking new model every week, if not every day. And so I think the key thing for me is demystifying that, because people are scared of it. They have fears about it. They don't know what it means for them, for their careers, but also they're not confident to talk about it. And that's a I address, especially with like leaders and HR leaders particularly. It's kind of empowering them to be the person in the room who can speak knowledgeably about AI and actually talk about how you can practically implement it in your business.
And I guess there's quite a vulnerability for some people being quite senior in an organization, suddenly going back and saying, this is changing how I'm going to work, but I don't really understand it. And therefore I need help with it.
Yeah, massively. I think I've worked with some really senior leaders, very, important people. There's a temptation to look like you're the glorious leader who knows it all. And I think that's dangerous in any context, because none of us know everything. And we do have to rely on other people to teach us or to upskill us or even just to be a sounding board, that's like more amplified than ever before when it comes to AI, because it is such new technology. And I think sometimes you get very overconfident leaders who kind of oversell it.
Yeah.
And sort of will come in and say the most ridiculous things that make no sense if you understand AI and how it works. And you don't want to shame anyone. You want to just create a place where they can open up and actually talk about the challenges they've got and what they want to do with it, what they want to do with the technology. But it's the first step always to me is sort of demystifying it and people understanding the basics of how these models operate in a non-technical way, as non-technical as you can be. And then building those connections and that and trust. It's a lot of the things that you talk about when it comes to AI, and especially AI leadership and transformation and change management. They're a tale as old as time. None of those are new things. It's just that AI is such an amplifier of all the challenges that come up in the world of business, and have done for centuries.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's it. And well, amplification is a great word for it, because it does just, whether you're good or whether you're bad, it amplifies each polar opposite just as much, doesn't it?
And I was just going to say, like, off the back of that as well, when it comes to leaders, feeling, intimidated or a little bit like a fraud because they feel they should be more across this than they are. I think that, again, classic thing I would have said before AI is that I think what we admire much more now is leaders who are much more vulnerable. And I have to say, there's things I don't know. We're learning together and relying on you to help come on this journey with me. I think that's much more encouraging and human, and actually gets a lot more buy-in from your organization than sort of pretending to be the expert and blundering through it, even though you're probably being overconfident.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that's something I've always tried to put in my career is that vulnerability. You can't know all the answers to everything. I mean, the world moves that fast. Like you said, with being an AI expert, as soon as you say it, it's out of date. So no, that's a great take on it. And so how have you found working with clients then? Just a kind of general process. Is it quite easy to get on board with clients, or clients quite easy to absorb all this information? Or what's the kind of journey, I suppose?
Well, I think actually it's a good moment in time to be like in the space where we both are. I would say even 18 months ago, when I was, talking about AI in HR circles, there was not a lot of direct engagement. It was kind of like, oh, that's vaguely interesting. I'll get around to it at some point, or just outright kind of fear or condemnation. I've used ChatGPT once and it was rubbish. AI is rubbish. It's never going to replace me because, I'm a people person. It has no place in my life. But I think more recently, literally in the past sort of 6 months, I would say that's changing a lot. I think there's a lot more businesses that are actually deciding that they've really got to get on board, and that's often coming right from the top. And so that filters down to your leadership team and to your HR leaders, who suddenly, which I did not see even a year ago, was people looking for recommendations for trainers or workshops. Or even recently, like locally, I live in Kent and I do a lot of networking here. And even like small, medium businesses and industries that you would not imagine would be the first sort of your first clients in AI training are looking for that. And it's changed dramatically, I think. And I think we're just on the cusp of that people are looking for more information. And then the second thing is just that levels of maturity are just hugely skewed. You never know what you're going to get. There's some organizations and, even quite large organizations where people really know very, very little. And that's not to criticize, I never judge because everyone's at a different stage. But I had a conversation with someone, very large company who had Copilot. No one had showed them how to use it. And, they were asking questions like, how can I help draft it? How can I use this to help me draft an email? And yet last week I spoke to a small solicitors firm, 6 people in the organization, but the guy who ran it had rolled out, he'd got a Perplexity Pro license for everyone in his team. And it just shows you, I think that it doesn't matter your size or scale, AI, if you adopt it, can be an absolute game changer.
And I guess one of the questions I get, and I think you'll get this quite similarly, is do I need a big budget to implement in AI? Is it a big technology change? Is it like a transformational IT platform driven change program that I need? So I guess have you come across that kind of scenario where you're dealing with teams who are
Yeah,
asking those questions in a smaller budget? Or?
they absolutely are. And it's, the focus for my business is really, HR teams and small to medium sized. So, that's like my sweet spot. Enjoyed even before I worked in AI. But I've worked in larger organizations and I talk to a lot of people who work in larger organizations. And I think the pitfalls of sort of great big corporate, transformation projects are actually great around AI. Really quite challenging because first and foremost, people talk about AI strategy. We want it to do sexy, cool things, and they don't really have a clear vision of what they want to use it for. And then they tend to implement or can implement in a very top-down way, in a clunky way, without really interacting with people. And like I said, there's certain skills which, hopefully I've learned in my career about how you approach, change management. And I think that side is often not addressed in those big wholesale transformations, launching a tool or a system from the top that often doesn't get the engagement that it should get because people don't feel they own it. And the other side of that, on the kind of enterprise level side, is that I think what we're seeing is a lot of, really well established tools and providers of things like CRMs or that are sort of bolting on AI, and sometimes not in a very great way in my perspective. They all want to say we've got AI integrated now, but they're kind of like bolt-ons that are kind of retrofitted rather than redesigning systems. And so I think there's actually some quite poor sort of enterprise level AI tools that are being baked into things that people have used. And again, they get an impression that it's not great. And then I would say at the other end of the scale, more my space, sort of small, medium sized, the message I have is that actually AI is just an amazing tool, to justify a return on investment. If you're if you're a 200-person organization, all of the major tools have either business or corporate levels, which are very robust in terms of security, and they don't cost a lot. It can be literally, for a small team, it can be a few £100 a month, which is nothing. So I think the implementation is it's important how it's rolled out, and the experience I've had in change management and bringing people along is what's often overmissed. And I think actually that's where smaller teams and smaller companies have a huge advantage because they can move very quickly. They can be very agile. They can try things, break things. If they don't work, move on very quickly. Whereas larger organizations, it's more bureaucratic and it's a bit more critical if things break down.
And I guess each have got the pros and cons, haven't they? Like a smaller firm might be able to move quicker, but are they protecting the data as much as they technically should?
Well,
what are they putting in there and what they're not?
I can tell you. I mean, there are horror stories, and that I've come across already, and that is a massive problem. Because there's some organisations who are really pushing back. Banning AI. Banning AI, you can't use it. Do you think everyone's adhering to that? No, they're not. There are thousands of people involved in shadow AI doing their work on their personal, chat GPT account, and then, copying and paste it into your systems. And if you don't engage with people, encourage them to be honest about what tools they're using, and then find a way for them to be able to use those in their work, you're opening up a massive black hole in terms of risk and data security.
Yeah, I guess, AI is going to fundamentally change the way everybody works to some extent, sooner than later. I mean, it started with coding because coding can then make faster coding, which can then obviously permeate out from there, haven't they? But, that's what the kind of thought processes I would think around that. But even physical manual labor, you've got, what are they, Tesla robots, Optimus robots, or whatever they are. So, it's going to touch everybody. So I think, coming back to your point there, banning it outright, it might look like the right position to take when you don't have all the answers. But on the flip side, you're not going to have all the answers unless you try it safely and encourage your team to put it in that safety net and try it with you. But again, I guess that comes back to the leadership point of being able to say that you don't know, or the leader to say they don't know, and try together, really.
Yeah, for sure. And again, the other classic, organizational dysfunction that you often still see is ownership, of who's owning this, who's accountable for it. It's very basic, management, leadership stuff. But I think something AI can feel like a bit of a hot potato because there are risks.
Yeah.
And so I sometimes find that people are reluctant to take ownership, in case it goes wrong. Someone said to me recently, I thought it's absolutely true. If you're bringing AI into your organization, if it does a brilliant job, then you thank the tool. The tool is amazing. It's achieved this. If it goes wrong, you don't blame AI, you blame the person who implemented it.
Yeah.
And so I think it's very difficult for the people who are standing up and being the cheerleaders for AI right now. Because if they're not the CEOs or leaders of organizations, because sometimes they'll get engagement and get listened to, and sometimes they don't. And I often see that, and sometimes my role is to come in and help bolster that argument and translate it and explain it in a way that kind of C-suite level can understand, which is a skill in itself.
Yeah, yes. And I guess a lot of people will see a lot of the doom and gloom headlines of this company's cut by 4,000 people. HSBC, I think, have come out recently and said 20,000 people, I think, from memory, which I know we've spoken about this before, but and it's been documented in the press, and also that these numbers aren't just because of AI, they are because of other enhancements, over hiring when it was cheap to hire people, and kind of enterprise-wide I don't want to say neglect, is quite a harsh word, and bloat, if you like, in the process where it doesn't need to be. But it's pinned on AI, which doesn't have, the thousands and thousands that is necessarily the headline-grabbing figure. So is any of your clients or people who you work with kind of scared of that, of the incoming AI doom story?
Yes, people are genuinely uneasy, scared about, will AI replace me? I mean, it sounds a sort of glib question, but people genuinely are concerned about that. And they're not necessarily comfortable to say that out loud. But I always like, when I'm doing a workshop, I like to have a section where I sort of say to people, what's the worst and what's the best that could happen if AI was rolled out in your company for everyone? And that's where those kind of conversations come out. And you're absolutely right. It's, we forget, if we're, obsessed with AI and working it every day, that we're in a bubble. The vast majority of people don't have that level of understanding. So what is getting through is the doom and gloom and the Armageddon headlines, because that's what, sells newspapers or gets clicks, which is probably more appropriate today. So yeah, I see it all the time. There is genuine fear. I think I'm probably slightly more unusual in that I don't use the standard response, which is, of course AI won't take your job. It will mean changes. There's going to be massive changes to the workforce and to what roles exist in it because of AI. I've absolutely no doubt of that. In a lot of circumstances, I think that'll be that existing teams can do a lot more with less. I think that's the forward way of thinking about utilizing AI. You could use it if you were focused solely on bottom line and stripping your organization back to the bone. You could use it to reduce headcount. I think that's slightly short-sighted, or very short-sighted, because actually empowering people with what AI can help them do better or quicker, and giving them more time to do the really important work that they're actually employed to do, is so much more impactful. And I think the organizations who realize that will be much more innovative and grow much more quickly.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I heard the terms on a recent podcast, and it was efficiency AI or opportunity AI. And obviously the efficiency one is all focused on reducing costs, taking people out, replacing it with an AI agent. And opportunity AI, as you've just eloquently put it, is giving your people access to these tools to enhance what they are doing. And it's asking the question of what more could we get done now that we couldn't do this time last year.
Yeah.
It's a challenging one, because you can see the expenditure, the cost of this from a finance lens. Certainly I can from a finance background. And you're like, even when there was no AI in the picture, the question was always, can you do more with less? And I guess that's only going to get amplified in the short term. But the long term tail that follows this is where it's going to be felt in 2 or 3 years' time, where you've cut to the bone, then people start leaving, and then you've got nobody left to run the shows.
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes me think of another couple of things as well, which is a constant question that I'm thinking about from my background and perspective, is about entry-level careers and like how you build that pipeline of tomorrow's leaders, because that, I think, is the one area where actually it genuinely is beginning to impact. Because your entry level roles before would have been sitting in the corner filling in an Excel spreadsheet and making the tea. Still need someone to make the tea, but those entry level roles, a lot of the research and sort of grunt work that they were doing can be easily replaced by AI. So I think again, sharp-sighted approach as well. We don't need to hire graduates now, but where are the people going to come from to grow in your organization? I just think it'll be a rebalancing. So like I said about roles changing, the entry level roles will become something very different. I think it will become more about being AI literate and managing teams of agents, for example, and actually using building those human skills to understand how to operate in an organizational context, and AI will be able to manage office politics, and I always think that's a really good example. And then the second thing I was going to say, when we're talking about the news headlines and whether companies are, using AI to replace us all, that isn't really happening yet. But you'd think it was. And that's because, well, I don't know if I call it, but it's AI washing, especially organizations who are answerable to shareholders. As you said, if it's just been a case of bad management or bloat, AI is a very convenient scapegoat. Or, getting rid of everyone because AI is replacing them. It's not happening in reality. Most roles. There are exceptions, like you mentioned. Software developers, AI was built by coders, so their first test case is to get AI to write code. Claude now basically writes its next iteration with no human involvement. So yes, of course there's going to be changes, but for most roles that's not been the case. And there's some really obvious examples, like Klarna is the most obvious I can think of. Very openly said, and I think they meant it, we can scale back on our customer support because AI can do it. And 6 months later, they brought most of those people back because it was a disaster. And I think that's, again, a very good example of how, although things will change, we're not quite there yet in most industry roles.
No, and I think if you look back and look at the data behind when the computer first came in, and that went mass market, that took 10, 15 years for the numbers to come through in the productivity reporting as to how much it's actually impacted. So if you think, I think it's going to be quicker than 10 to 15 years with AI, just because it's a lot easier, I would say, to embed an agent, especially with the way the tools are building themselves essentially now, than it was to implement a mainframe system back in the 80s or something like that. But, it will have this lag to it. And you're right. I don't think we're seeing it yet, albeit in very small pockets in niche areas.
No, we're not. And another thing which, I was thinking about recently, and it was such a good point, the ridiculously fast rate that AI is developing. Someone said that in the last 12 months, that we sort of have developed enough new technology and tools that it would take you another 20 years to work out how to utilize them effectively and actually apply them to business. And I thought, that's not wrong. That's not wrong. It's moving so fast that it's very difficult to keep up with what the capabilities are. And there is a real risk that you invest too early in something that will go bust in a year, or just isn't fit for purpose. So I think we've got so much powerful tech now that a lot of people don't even realize is there, but it's actually the skills of how you utilize that and implement it in your business that is just not there yet for most people.
Yeah. So where have you seen in the clients that you've worked with or the projects that you've worked on, where have you seen it where you think companies are getting it wrong from the outset?
Well, like I said, I think the first thing is a knee-jerk panic reaction. Shut it down. Issue of statement saying no one can use AI. Full stop. That's it. Because I think the genie's out of the bottle, and I think that will create secrecy. And people who don't feel engaged and open and honest with their organizations. In terms of what else you can get wrong, I mean, really practical things, or, just not understanding the risks. Again, I'm often surprised by the kind of lack of understanding of what the risks are. So again, we all ChatGPT is a good example because it's been around the longest. We all know it, and it's a good all-round tool. But there's even I would say don't ever put anything remotely sensitive in a free model. That's fairly obvious. But then when people start paying 20 quid a month, you think, oh, it's fine, I can put in what I want. Absolutely, you can't. And that might sound naive, but that actually goes quite far up the kind of leadership chain of my experience, and even for quite large organizations. So I think you've got to understand the risk. The other mistake I see, which is related to that or follows on, is I expected when I sort of started this journey that I'd be going into organizations and I'd be speaking to IT teams and they'd be absolutely up on it. And they'd be able to tell me what tools they were using and, what level of encryption and, data security they were using. And it stunned me that a lot really don't, because it's a technology that doesn't really fall in the normal wheelhouse of people who have grown up and worked in the world of, technology and data security. And that's a massive risk. I feel like there's a massive amount of upskilling that needs to happen with those teams, because everyone assumes, IT know. They don't a lot of the time. There's really great risks there. And what's I going to say in terms of, I think I'm a positive person, so I always think about the good things, but in terms of the more, where companies are getting it wrong, it really goes back again to what I was saying at the start. It's not starting out with a clear vision of what you want to use AI for.
Yeah.
A strategy, which is a horribly overused word, but what's a strategy? It means having a plan and an approach you're going to take to do that. And if you don't know right from the start, it's probably going to fail, because it's got to distill down into real use cases for people that are actually going to help them do their jobs better. And in a lot of cases, it's not. And that's why there's all these stories now about people investing millions and not getting return on investment. It's just, poor change management.
And there's a lot of conversation around AI replacing jobs, as we've already said. But how much importance do you think people's expertise and existing knowledge is when starting to use AI, when looking at some of the tools to help them on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I'll tell you one thing that I do that always comes up in the work that I do with the audience that I work with, is how important your knowledge and specialism is. I think that is something that is often overlooked. So what I mean by that is, HR is a great example. I could say, well, I don't need an HR team anymore because, I can get ChatGPT or Claude to come up with a maternity policy for my organization. And you probably could without, not knowing anything about it, you could probably get something half decent that popped out of it. Where I think we're kind of sometimes not realizing the value of human experiences skills is that, in my mind, I would say AI, if you're using it well, can get you 80% of the way there, but you've really got to do the final 20% yourself. And that comes from your experience and your knowledge. So, if I look at that generic policy sort of thing, that doesn't land properly. That's not going to be appropriate to this organizational setup. This doesn't take account of X, Y, Z. And I think you've got to put that investment in owning what comes out of AI, number one, and then putting your own your own knowledge and skills and experience on top of that. It's in the same way, which I've seen, it's happening more and more, especially in the media. You can't blame AI for something that you produce yourself. It's not AI's fault, it's yours, because you should have owned that work and checked it. And I think that's often a point that's missed.
I agree. I mean, you can feed it all the context in the world, but it still can get things wrong. So you need to be able to understand what's coming out of it and validating it that it works in that scenario.
And we can all do that. We can all think we're interested experts because something comes out. In fact, I've got a good example of. So I was working on a case where things, got to a stage where I had to involve a lawyer in reviewing something and sending a letter. Can't say any more than that. But so I was kind of drafting what I wanted this letter to say, for this lawyer to check. And by the time I'd finished, I thought, this is amazing. This is the most, astute, succinct, brilliant legal summarization of what I want to say. And I sent it off to a lawyer with a lot of years of experience who said, yeah, it's technically correct, but, you're adding too much here. You don't need to say all this. This bit isn't relevant. And it was a kind of, I felt like I'd been taught, basically, because I thought that I'd produced something that was incredible, but actually someone with skill, experience, and real world grounding sort of ripped it apart, basically. It's a humbling but very important experience.
Yeah, no, that is a very important experience. Yeah, it does showcase exactly what you need to be able to do with these, because the risk is you do have a team of generalists working on super specific work that shouldn't be doing it that way around.
No, I mean, it's become a modern cliche, but human in the loop is absolutely crucial. And I think a lot of what I see as bad AI is where there is no human in the loop. It's like, yes, I could automate, a load of outreach messages to people on LinkedIn, but when you get those and they've got some awful generic line and you immediately hit delete. Whereas if you'd taken a minute, 30 seconds to craft that yourself, you probably would be a lot more likely to get the desired effect, which is a response from someone. Again, that's another small example of don't automate everything. Always put your own human spin on the end. It's just that you get there faster.
Yeah, agreed. Okay. So I think that kind of moves us quite nicely onto the kind of second half of the show, which is more around 3 items, topics, books, podcasts that you, or just thoughts that you're having and ruminating on at the minute that you think people can learn from or that can ponder on to help them on their journey. So what are your 3 key takeaways?
I think I'd say be curious, number one. I think I'm a pretty curious person anyway, and most of us, I think, who sort of are early adopters to AI are just curious. We want to see what it can do and how it's all going to turn out. And I would say make time to learn about AI. Now, you might not be as obsessive as me reading, 10 newsletters a day, which I wouldn't recommend. But I think make space in your day to experiment. Again, got to start doing that safely, but make space to experiment. And if you're really curious about this and you want to learn more, there's a lot of resources out there. So I think that's the learning part is actually what I would recommend to people. There are so many really incredible thinkers out there on this topic. There will only be someone in your niche. Follow them, talk to them, share stories and horror stories. And don't forget, there's lots and lots of training around this. Most of the pioneer models and or AI organizations, in fact, pretty much all of them, I think, just give away endless amounts of training content if you rummage around on their websites, because they want people to engage. So there's resources there. It's just, as is often the case in the world in which we live, it's data overload. It's knowing which is high quality information, finding it and absorbing it. We were all meant to be geniuses because we're Wikipedia, but it hasn't quite worked out like that. Because it's all too much and we're all just too, we'd all rather go and watch Love Island. You've got to be curious. Then what else would I say? In terms of, there's a million and one people I follow. I'll tell you one book that I really started me on this journey. was, oh goodness, I've forgotten the name of it, by Parmy Olson. I'm going to have to look it up. Supremacy by Parmy Olson. It's a really ripping good yarn about the early creation of AI. So it really focuses on Demis Hassabis and Sam Altman. And it's very dramatic, but it helps you understand so much about what went into those first kind of crazy few years where people were actually trying to build that technology out. It just got me so passionate about it because I wanted to learn more.
It does sound fascinating. There's another book. Is it The Empire of AI or AI Empire or something along those lines? It sounds Empire. And we'll link both these books in the description. But that one focused on a lot of the background and a lot of how the models were trained and the outsourcing of, is it a good reply, is it a bad reply, and that was quite eye opening. I thought, if the Supremacy book is as good as that one, I mean, that'd be really interesting to read.
What it is what I love about it is it's written by really good, kind of popular journalist. So it's highly accessible. It's, and it's full of, the drama of it all, which is still, something I find fascinating. The drama that goes on in Silicon Valley is it doesn't have a patch on Dallas or EastEnders. It's crazy. And another book and a person to follow, I'd say, Co-Intelligence by Ethan Mollick. And he's a Wharton professor. He I think he's obviously incredibly intelligent, but I think he has a real talent for communicating really complex ideas. And I get an enormous amount out of his kind of thought leadership, if you like. And then beyond that, I would honestly just say find like-minded people who are at the same level as you. There are groups growing up all the time for people who want to learn more about AI or implement it in their business. And that's something that I've got an enormous amount from, and actually where I've learned a lot from in the last year.
So I think, all you three think, Be Curious, your Supremacy book, the Ethan Mollick Co-Intelligence link, it all comes back to that. If you the Carol Dweck growth mindset, keep looking at what's out there, keep being curious, like you've said, and push your comfort zone, for want of a better phrase, push your comfort zone to learn and understand these. Because like you said before, everyone's going through this at the same time, and nobody has all the answers yet. Perhaps ChatGPT does, I don't know, but the University of YouTube is a phenomenal resource for anything from making stuff on N8N or make.com to using ClickUp and the AI on ClickUp to Copilot, ChatGPT. The stuff that people build and have the time to build is phenomenal. So just watching a few of those is enough. And obviously reaching out to the likes of your good self,
of course,
for further courses, coaching, advisory.
And there's one other really simple thing actually, which I would say, like, if you're on that journey, I think it's incredibly easy to get distracted, by the latest, announcement on this incredible model that does this. And, I'm terribly guilty of that, but I have the excuse that it's, my business model. My goodness, I don't think I make any money because I've got subscriptions to everything. I really need to trim them back. But it's one thing I say to people when you're starting is pick one model and stick with it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're just going to keep jumping around. 12 months ago, that would have been ChatGPT. Now, it could be Claude, it could be Gemini. It depends what works for you. Do a little bit of research to find the tool that's going to be most useful for your role or your use case, and then stick with it and really get to understand it inside out. That'll stand you in good stead.
Yeah, that is a really good point, because I'm similar. I've got magpie instincts to go to the next shiny thing, and then it's similar to you. I've got subscriptions coming out of my ears, but yeah, you're right. Find a tool that you can practice on, that you've got time and capacity, and if it's in a work environment, the right setup to do that, and you'll learn most of the overlapping technology from one good model.
Yeah, it's all the models are kind of converging, in terms of the capability. There's some which have an edge. There's some, Claude doesn't do images, for example, or video. But I think in 12 months' time, there'll be little to judge between them. You'll just have, maybe the first and second place nudging each other up. But Nothing, I think that's the last thing I'd say really on that topic is nothing you invest in learning now about AI is going to be wasted. Because once you begin to understand how they work, how you talk to them, what they're capable of, that's going to stand you in enormously good stead when the models keep growing to your life more and more, because they will do. So you might as well, get on board now.
Yeah.
Rather than be forced to get on board, in 6 to 12 months' time.
Yeah. Get ahead of the curve. Absolutely. Okay. Fantastic. If people wanted to find you online, where's the best people to reach out to you?
LinkedIn, definitely. Enlightened People, or me, on LinkedIn. I do a lot of AI news that is hopefully relevant to HR and small businesses, and I always try and explain it in a way that is accessible. Also, my website, enlightenedpeople.co.uk. You can reach out to me there. And again, there's quite a few resources that are absolutely free to download, prompt libraries. Get in touch any way you can.
Fantastic. And like I said at the start, I really enjoy your LinkedIn content. It's very useful. It puts a human spin on what's in the news and all the changes that are coming out. So I've found it very useful. So I can highly recommend that they give you a follow and a connect on LinkedIn and check out Enlightened People. Absolutely.
Thank you.
But look, no, thank you. That's been a very, very good conversation, Ian. We could talk all day, I'm sure. And at one point we will, I'm sure, meet in person. But virtually we'll have to do for now. Look, thank you very much and much appreciated.
My pleasure.
So a big thank you to Ian for joining as my guest for this week. So yeah, check out his LinkedIn and his website where you can. If you find this useful and this conversation interesting, hit follow or subscribe if you haven't already. And a review or a rating genuinely helps the show, and I do truly appreciate it. The AI Leadership Roadmap is free. Everything you need to start leading with AI practically at www.theaileaderlab.com, and the link is in the show notes. Until next time, bye-bye for now.